Tier lists are everywhere these days, to the point that it's actually hard to avoid them even if you try. Oh, so you like Smash Brothers? Well, here's 43 different tier lists for it the week after it comes out. You live on Earth, you say? Well, here's a whole YouTube channel dedicated to tier listing everything on the planet. And by the way, this channel is awesome. Oh, you're into pencil sharpeners, eh? Well, there's a pencil sharpener tier list. Yes, this is an actual thing I found on the internet. It exists. Look at it. But, as usual, there always comes a point in these intros where I say, but the point is, and this video is no different, because the point is that if there's one arena that's right for the art of tier listing, it's Magic the Gathering, where all the different decks in a given format might as well be characters on a fighter select screen. Just like a good fighting game, a good MTG format has elements that are well balanced against one another, and we're in just such a format right now. I'm only about the 6,000th person to say that this is the best standard in a long time, precisely because for the first time in forever, it's difficult to determine which deck is the air quotes best deck. But today, we set about the task of doing just that, noting, of course, that none of this is official and I'm just some guy. But everybody loves a tier list, unless, of course, you hate tier lists, in which case I'm sure you'll get enough sweet, sweet dopamine release out of hate watching this video. So let's get into it. Today, the standard deck tier list. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like Magic, and as you know, today we're ranking all the best decks in Standard. I'm actually putting myself through that. And we've got a lot to talk about today, so I want to go ahead and get right to it. But before that, just briefly, remember to like the video, do the YouTube stuff. You know, a lot of work went into this one, so give me a digital tip of the hat, hit that like button, subscribe if you enjoy the content, consider throwing $1 into the Patreon, link in the description if you're into it. You don't have to, but if you want to, it's there, it's an option. And if you want to try out any of these decks, I'll leave links in the description to examples of all of these on TCG players. So just remember all of that, but let's go ahead and get to it, because if there's a deck that's in the D tier of Standard, or at least let's put it this way, if there is a D tier period, I think the deck that's at the very tip top of it is Grixis Control. It's hard to deny that Grixis is a good deck, but it's not a settled deck. Despite a smattering of tournament results, the best of which was a top 16 at the SCG Classic in Las Vegas, but which also included a top 16 finish at the Magic Online Championship Series, hereby referred to as MOX by the way, and a pair of top 32 finishes at GP Milwaukee and an MTGO Pro Tour qualifier. Common bonds between Grixis decks exist though, the most common actually being Thought Erasure, which might not be the single most powerful card in the deck, but it is a great reason to go Grixis. It proactively wrecks the plan of most of the other decks on this list, especially when on the play. But the other most common card to see in the deck is, less surprisingly this time, Nicol Bolas, which you might have expected to be the most common card to appear here. In truth, most Grixis decks are Bolas decks. The power of the Ravager is such that it's often one of the only threats in the deck, although it is usually joined by at least one other creature like Niv Mizzet, Dream Eater, or very occasionally Doom Whisperer. The Grixis deck is mostly about getting to the late game and either transforming Bolas or just attacking through with him for the win. And that takes a spell suite capable of prolonging the game for a while. But of course, one of the benefits of playing black and red is a rich removal package with early game zaps like Lava Coil and Cast Down, backed up by mid-game hammers like Vraska's Contempt and Ritual of Soot. Of course, Grixis gets a nice counterspell suite and can actually play Sinister Sabotage pretty easily thanks to its 4 different blue dual lands. But there are 2 other important cards in the main deck. The Eldest Reborn, and in at least 3 different lists that have posted tournament results, Disinformation Campaign. It's worth noting that Campaign is also the backbone of a Dimir deck that's been steadily 5-0ing in the MTGO Competitive League results. The Eldest Reborn serves as a removal piece, an anti-control piece, and a reanimation spell all in one, and it's another big reason Jeskai mages might consider giving in to the dark side. It's actually a pitch-perfect on-curve answer to Teferi, so it's a great metagame call for when you come up against the single best card in Standard. The Grixis sideboard is very flexible, and the numbers tend to vary, but mostly it's a hodgepodge of counterspells and removal. More Ritual of Soot and spot removal against aggro, and more counterspells against midrange and control. Usually the only counterspell in the main is Sinister Sabotage, with a few deviations, but the sideboard is where the rest of the counterspell package is contained, with pieces like Negate and Disdainful Stroke being particularly popular. If there is a deck that I wanted to feature on this list that's in some ways an honorable mention, it's Grixis, because I think that if the Grixis mages ever settle on a list, then this deck could actually be very, very dangerous. But moving right along, let's enter the C tier here so that we can talk about the biggest underdog deck in the format, Mono Blue Tempo. The best budget deck in the format is still alive and kicking, and if nothing else, its perfect record in the standard portion of the Pro Tour is enough to land it on the list, but it also posted a top 16 finish as recently as SCG Classic Baltimore, so the deck is still viable. It has a nice, clean game plan. Early creatures like Mistcloak Herald and Siren Stormtamer combine well with Curious Obsession to create fast card advantage, but Robin Williams comes down late to finish the game as a huge flyer, and we protect our creatures with a fairly diverse counterspell package that includes Wizard's Retort, Spell Pierce, and Dive Down as an honorary counterspell. The deck also has various forms of disruption outside of its counters, most notably Merfolk Trickster, which can come down and do some really nasty things in specific situations, but has a lot of utility purpose in any scenario. Aside from that, the deck draws cards with Opt and Chart a Course, and that's pretty much it. Games 2 and 3 are a little more difficult given our lack of options out of the sideboard, but there are a variety of interesting cards here, so expect to see Exclusion Mage, Diamond Mare, and Deep Freeze on occasion, but that said, the deck usually overloads on counterspells in the board, so you can also expect to see Syncopates, Disdainful Strokes, and Negates. Mono Blue has been a fairly simple deck during its time in Standard, and mostly relies on Pilot's skill to operate optimally. While not the most powerful deck in the format by any means, Mono Blue has proven that it is the little Mac of the meta, and on a good day with a focused Pilot at the helm, Tempo can TKO any deck in the format. But bringing up the top of the C tier here is the newest kid in town, but it looks disturbingly like the kid that just moved away, Mono Red. Now when you talk Mono Red in Guild Standard, you're actually talking about two decks. There's the Mono Red Experimental Frenzy deck that plays aggressive early drops like Fanatical Firebrand and Viashino Pyromancer, and then, more lately, there's the Mono Red, quote, Control deck that plays Karn as a Karn advantage piece and Rekindling Phoenix and Siege Gang Commanders as late game control finishers. To be fair, the deck doesn't always play Karn in the main, but you do always see him in the side if nothing else. However, the deck always plays Goblin Chain Whirler, Direfleet Daredevil, and in many cases, Legion Warboss. In a lot of ways, Mono Red Control exists to be the best Chain Whirler Rekindling Phoenix shell in the format, but Daredevil plays well against the various spell-heavy decks that we have in this meta, of which there are a lot, and Warboss is a creature that can take the game over while your opponents are busy spending removal on Chain Whirlers and Phoenixes and such. Another card the main deck plays without fail is, kind of surprisingly, Treasure Map, nearly always as a 4-of, too. When the deck first began life, Map seemed like a backup to Karn, but as time has gone by, Karn has been relegated mostly to the sideboard, and Map has kept its place because it's a great late game card advantage tool that also gets you scries in the meantime. This version of Mono Red has been doing very well in comparison to its aggro counterpart lately, posting a top 16 at Mox and putting 2 lists in the top 16 of the MTGO Pro Tour qualifier, not to mention consistently landing in the MTGO competitive league results for what that's worth. The removal suite in the deck is ... hot, pardon the pun, Lava Coil, Shivan Fire, and Banefire all appear consistently. Coil is hands down one of the best kill spells in the whole format right now. Shivan Fire fits in with the deck's tendency to go ham in the mid game, and Banefire pushes control decks to the limit, while still functioning as spot removal from time to time. The sideboard is usually more of the same here, adding Fight with Fire and Star of Extinction to take out specific meta threats like Lyra Dawnbringer and Carnage Tyrant respectively, but Fiery Cannonade is also a common piece of sideboard tech to see here, and it's a decent piece to have against Boros aggro and Selesnya token decks. Altogether, Mono Red is an interesting meta call. It has the removal and early guys to go toe-to-toe with aggro until it can set up its mid-game Go Super Saiyan plan, but it also has some nice card advantage tools against control, as well as some threats that control has a hard time dealing with, and the aforementioned Banefire to finish games when they inevitably go late against Jeskai, so we've got workable game plans against just about anything we might come up against on the other side of the table. It feels strange for a Mono Red deck to be considered versatile, but that's exactly where we are today in the world of Standard. But let's kick things up a notch, because there is a huge degree of separation between the decks we're about to discuss and the decks that we've discussed so far. So, let's call these next couple of decks the B tier, and start with the Selesnya Tokens deck. Now, Selesnya hasn't been the most successful of the Ravnica guilds, but it has had some strong finishes, including a first place finish at the SCG Classic in Las Vegas. I like to call it lost wages, and a second place finish at GP Shizuka. It's still the same deck, but it's mostly a question of numbers and the card choices. March of Multitudes, History of Benalia, and Tristani are still its most important cards, but the shell is even wider than just these 3 cards because nearly every card in the deck adds to the synergy. Song of Freyalice is a 2 or 3 of that breaks stalemates late. Flower Flourish lowers the land count while also allowing Selesnya to break through in the late game. And Legion's Landing is another early drop that can lead to serious problems for opponents as the game gets to its later stages. The deck also has a great suite of 2 drops for its plan, like Imara, Thorn Lieutenant, and Saproling Migration, all of which are capable of expanding our board even further and are significant all the way up into the later turns, especially Thorny Britches and Mushroom Parade. Finally, in the main deck, you'll see 4 copies of Conclave Tribunal pretty much without deviation. This is a very good removal spell that almost always comes at a discount and can take out nearly any problem permanent, giving the deck a degree of versatility even with its limited ability to interact. Green-White has a wide range of sideboard options, and these boards are built differently every time, but cards you'll see in this board that you don't see in other decks include Nullhide Ferox to fight the Control Menace, and Immortal Sun against mid-range decks. Aside from that, the board commonly contains Knight of Autumn, as well as removal like Settle the Wreckage and Seal Away or Baffling End. The Selesnya deck follows a trend that we've been seeing throughout this analysis, which is that it has a decent plan for the early game, but focuses on breaking the game late with expensive, powerful cards. The green-white decks require a little bit of extra synergy, but they've got it in, wait for it, multitudes. But every format needs an aggro all-star, so bringing up the top of the B tier here is the Boros Legion. Now, if you're looking to go fast, red-white is still your best bet. The best performance Boros has put up so far this season is obviously the Pro Tour, with more than half of the top 8 decks being red-white. And since then, it has faltered a bit, but in no way has it fallen off, finishing first at Mox and putting a list in the top 8 of SCG Classic Baltimore. The 1 and 2 drops are still the bread and butter of the deck, with Sky Marcher Aspirant, Adonto Vanguard especially, and Legion's Landing forming the core of the early game. But even Snubhorn Sentry has been getting in on the action lately, seriously. The most important cards in the deck, though, are arguably Banalish Marshal, History of Benalia, and Venerated Loxodon. All of these boost our creatures and our bodies at the same time, too, so any combination of 2 of these can make your small dudes amazing in the mid-game. The deck also plays Pride of Conquerors and or Heroic Reinforcements less often to push through big attack steps and decrease its chances of drawing dead late, as both of these would be great top decks anytime past turn 3. Just like the Selesnya deck, this list often plays 4 Conclave Tribunal as its only means of main deck interaction, but also just like that deck, we're more concerned with heaping pressure on the opponent than we are in responding to what they're doing. In some ways, the sideboard takes a cue from last season's mono red deck by allowing the deck to transform into a more mid-range monster with threats like Lyra and Aurelia to boost the top end, but you'll often see Tocatli Honor Guard to spike the Golgari matchup. This is arguably the most important piece of tech in the deck, and it's helped the deck stay viable in this meta. Overall, Boros follows the same plan of early drops into mid and late game gear shift that we've been seeing, but it's definitely a step faster in execution. It pays for that by having less powerful options in the late game than other decks in the format, but it still uses what pieces it has to push through wins if the game goes long. Well, let's get to the big boys. We are in the A tier now because there's another degree, I think, of separation in terms of tournament finishes at least, between the next 3 decks, the last 3 decks in the video really, and the last couple of decks that we've done. These are the decks that have performed the best this season so far, starting with number 3, Izzet Drakes. Izzet Drakes has actually diverged into 2 different decks, but Crackling Drake is still the centerpiece of the deck, along with Enigma Drake, although less and less often. Crackling Drake is often an easy 7 power or more, and it even still counts cards we jumpstart. Plus, possibly most importantly, it draws us a card, so playing it costs nothing in terms of card advantage. Goblin Electromancer is also a creature you nearly always see here, as it decreases the cost of well over a dozen cards in the deck, and makes it easier to grow your Drakes. But where things converge is in another creature choice, because the deck tends to play either Arclight Phoenix or Niv Mizzet without too much crossover. There's arguments for both, but the Phoenix list has posted the better results and gotten more of the spotlight up to now. That said, Niv Mizzet is the newer tech, and not having the stress of making Phoenix work consistently seems like smooth sauce, so it's largely up to personal preference and whether or not you want to go fast or play a more drawn-out game. The Niv Mizzet version of the deck is a lot like the other decks we've discussed. Build up momentum early and dominate the late game with a big threat like Crack Fiend or the Miz, but the Phoenix build is much more synergy driven. The synergy has a huge payoff, but of course it can fall apart. That said, The Arclight build is surprisingly reliable, and games where you get multiple Phoenixes in the yard early can lead to the fastest wins in Standard. The spell base is obviously incredibly important here, mostly due to our card draw suite, which includes Opt, Radical Idea, and most importantly Charter Course, which has actually been called the best card in Standard. 2 cards for 2 mana is a great deal in modern day Magic, and CAC is perhaps the card that keeps the deck running more than any other. The deck also has access to a nice removal package though, as it gets to play Lava Coil, Shock, and notably Beacon Bolt, which gives the deck the reach it needs to kill large creatures and can be cast multiple times, which sometimes effectively locks the opponent out from playing creatures in a way. But the sideboard is mostly a counterparty, with staples like Negate and Disdainful Stroke appearing reliably, but Fiery Cannonade shows up again here as a sweeper option. Overall, Izzet Drakes is nothing if not 2 things: surprising and consistent. It's kind of a hard deck to take seriously in some ways, and yet it's taken first place at both SCG Classic Baltimore and first place at the SCG Invitational, as well as running up a top 8 at GP Milwaukee and 2 top 8s at the Star City Games Classic in Las Vegas. The deck has been carefully built from the ground up and continues to evolve to this day, and it's a deck that started from the bottom, but now it's here. But we're moving from a deck that's kind of difficult to categorize to a deck that's extremely easy to categorize, because number 2 is definitely the best control deck in the format. Let's take a look at Jeskai. Now, Jeskai is a paradox in that it's both under the radar and consistently discussed at the same time somehow. It's been racking up wins consistently, with the first place finish at Grand Prix Milwaukee being its shiniest trophy, but it also put 5 decks in the top 16 of that tournament. It had 3 decks in the top 8 of GP Shizuoka, top 4 of the SCG Invitational, and put 2 decks in the top 8 of the Mox. At its heart, the deck is still a Teferi deck, yes, but it's been playing a number of real threats, including Niv Mizzet, and often one or the other of the 2 top Drakes in the format. All of these are awesome once the Jeskai Mage has the game locked down to their liking and can finish the game quickly. It's the spell suite that matters most in a Jeskai control deck though, and this deck plays anywhere between 24 and 26 spells on average. The removal suite is the other best reason to play white besides Teferi, as we can add white pieces like Settle the Wreckage and Deafening Clarion, the latter of which is in some ways one of the biggest secrets to its success, and why, again, besides Teferi, Jeskai is preferable to Grixis for the majority of control players in the format. After that, the spell suite becomes extremely varied, but common sides are Sinister Sabotage and or Ionize as hard counters, Chemister's Insight and Opt to draw cards at instant speed, and in some cases, Expansion Explosion to either finish games late or do tricky stuff like copy counterspells that counter the very counterspell they copied in the first place. The sideboard is more of the same in terms of variance, because there are a lot of options for this color combination, but Lyra Dawnbringer, Negate, and Star of Extinction are probably the most common threads. Aside from that, you'll see the other usual suspect counterspells like Syncopate and Disdainful Stroke, along with some sweepers and the occasional Invoke the Divine. Jeskai is the most versatile deck in the format, which makes it the de facto best control deck in Standard. The best build still hasn't been settled on yet, and likely won't be, as is the nature of control decks, especially in evolving formats. The deck stands to gain a lot from Ravnica Allegiance, so its dominance likely won't end anytime soon, which is another reason it's all the way up here at number 2. But we made it, y'all. We're here at number 1, and if you follow Standard Magic, you probably already guessed what it is, and I'm not sure if you agree or not, but in terms of the results, again, you gotta give it to Golgari midrange. The pedigree this deck has generated during its tenure in Standard is insane, but I'll stick with the more recent stuff to demonstrate how dominant the deck is. First place at Grand Prix Shizuoka, 4 decks in the top 8 of GP Milwaukee, first place at the MTGO Pro Tour Qualifier, 4 decks in the top 8 of SCG Baltimore, 2 decks at Las Vegas, 3 decks in the Invitational, and 3 top 8s in the Mox. The only time this deck has stumbled this season at all was at the Pro Tour due to red-white decks adding Tocatli Honor Guard. Since then, Golgari has mostly adjusted and or lived on regardless, and it's still the most solid, reliable, consistent deck in the meta. The song mostly remains the same. Wildgrowth Walker, Merfolk Branchwalker, and Jadelight Ranger all appear in the deck with regularity, but they're backed up by an amazing late game plan that includes Golgari Finebroker and Fine Finality to generate value, and nasty expensive stuff like Carnage Tyrant and Vivian Reed to see you through to the end against the more controlling decks in the format. The removal suite is smaller than you'd expect, but Vraska's Contempt, Assassin's Trophy, and Ravenous Chupacabra are all mainstays for obvious reasons, and recently, Cast Down has come in to take down Honor Guards, other Wildgrowth Walkers, and lots of other early drops. The sideboard often looks very similar to the main deck, with cards like Vivian Reed and Carnage Tyrant showing up against control, but Duress and Golden Demise will often come in against control and aggro respectively. All in all, the results don't lie, and it's no surprise that Golgari is the best deck in the format, if that concept even exists right now. On any day, any of the top 6 decks in this video can beat any other deck, but the Rock has been the most successful and solid deck of the season in terms of high-profile tournament results. It should be noted that this is yet another deck that has a decent early game plan, playing creatures like Lana Elves and a Jade Light Ranger, or setting up for huge Wild Growth Walkers, but cards like Golgari Finebroker, Fine Finality, and Carnage Tyrant give it the best mid and late game plan in Standard too, and that's why so many players smell what the Rock is cooking. But I'm pretty sure that's it for today. I'm tapped out for now, but it's your turn. I'll turn it over to you, and this ought to be a fun one. Go down there to the comments section and lodge your complaints or your agreements. I don't know how you feel about this. I think that either Jeskai or Golgari is the best deck in the format, but I feel fairly confident saying it's Golgari when you see all the tournament results. So let me know how you feel about it down there. Anything I missed, anything you think that belongs in like D tier that I didn't bring up here, or any problems that you have with my ordering system, just let me know. Talk about it down there in the comments section. I read your comments. They'll get through to me. But in any case, aside from that, do all the YouTube stuff I asked you to do at the beginning of the video. Like, subscribe, share the video around if you want people to hate watch it more. This is probably what half of this is going to be. But I actually think this is a very objective list. I don't want Golgari to be number 1, but it just kind of is. I want it to be Izzet Drakes, but it just kind of isn't. So there's that. But do all the YouTube stuff. So, you know, to donate to the Patreon if you want to help out the channel. Even $1 helps out a lot. Or again, check out all these deck lists in the description. Go over to TCG Player where you can get them for the absolute cheapest. But aside from that, that's all I got. So remember to do all the things, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Remember to spread love and be kind.